Recording. All right. So let's get started. My name is Allison McWilliams. I am the Assistant Vice President for Mentoring and Alumni Personal and Career Development here at Wake Forest. I'd like to welcome you to today's Wednesday webinar, From First Gen to First Jobs, Navigating the College to Career Transition. And today I'm joined by two awesome Wake Forest alumni, Dr. Nate French and Dr. Rosa Garcia, whom I will introduce in a moment. We are recording this today, and it will be added to our Learn with Life After Wake platform and sent to you all by email after the fact as well. And today's webinar will be a conversation between the three of us about that sometimes challenging transition point from college to life and work after college, and in particular, how that transition is experienced by first generation college students and graduates. So let me introducing our, make sure that I'm getting video here. Okay, great. So Dr. Nate French. Dr. Nate French graduated from Wake Forest in 1993 with a double major in English and Communications. During his tenure at Wake Forest, he was a member of the Gospel Choir, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, the Black Student Alliance, and the debate team, as well as the yearbook staff. Immediately following graduation, he enrolled in grad school at UNC Chapel Hill, after which he returned to Wake, work in admissions, and then the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which is now known as the Intercultural Center. He then returned to grad school and completed his PhD in communication studies with a specific focus in public policy and organizational behavior. And then in 2009, he came back to Wake Forest again, because we just can't get rid of him, as the inaugural director of the Magnolia Scholars Program, which he will tell us more about today. And in 2019, he was appointed as an associate teaching professor in the Department of Communications. And then Dr. Rosa Garcia is a native of a small town in North Carolina and the daughter of immigrant parents. When she was in high school, she conducted research at Duke University as an NC Project Seed recipient, where she realized she enjoyed being in the lab. So in the fall of 2010, she joined Wake Forest as a Magnolia Scholar in pursuit of a degree in chemistry. In May of 2014, she graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Materials Chemistry with honors and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish. And then in December 2018, she graduated with a PhD in chemistry from NC State and made the transition to industry with BASF and its PhD Leadership Development Program, a 2-year program consisting of 3 8-month rotations. She's currently in her 3rd rotation as a technical specialist. She's here to share her story and experiences from being a first-generation college student, having 3 first jobs in less than 2 years. So we are thrilled to have them both here during this time together to have this conversation. So Rosa, let me start with you and tell us a little bit more about making the decision to go to grad school after college. What was that experience like, kind of moving from college to that work and life after college for you?
Absolutely. So when I was at Wake, I was fortunate to work and do research in lab. And at the time, I felt like it was a little bit more of, this is what we want to do. And to prove it, we're going to run these experiments and here's the result. But I was interested a little bit more of what and how can I build my critical thinking skills. And so I decided to go to grad school. At the time, I wanted to still stay close to my family in North Carolina, and NC State met that criteria. So I went to NC State. I think that one of the challenges for me and just even making that transition was, what group do you join? What are you looking for as you interview different PIs? And at the time, for me, it was more of, is the research interesting to me, and can I get along well with the students in the current group? What I didn't know was perhaps how to judge a group based on the resources that they had and the resources that I would need. So for me, I think that maybe the resources were a little lacking, but because I'm friendly and easygoing, I was able to interact with other graduate students in my program, my year, like other years. I learned of the equipment that they had in their labs and I was able to use it. And so that was one of the hurdles that I wasn't expecting. And as I look back, I'm like, yeah, knowing what resources are available to help you do your work would be something that's beneficial.
Mhm. Were there things that you felt like went particularly well with that transition?
I think again, I'm glad that I was able to go to the different PIs and interview them, talk about, what is the research that they do in the group. Um, I ended up picking a group that I enjoyed being in. I think that there was a little bit of challenge in getting started, replicating some of the work that was done. And, is it me or is it the chemistry?
Mm,
But like after running experiments and like showing, here's where I come, like, this is a problem, here's how we can fix it.
mm,
And here are the results. So again, it was going back to like, this is how I'm building my critical thinking skills. So I'm glad that I joined a group where my ideas were considered and I had a say in it. So that's what I enjoyed.
mm-hmm. And were there things when you look back on it that your experience at Wake Forest, or, as perhaps as a chemistry major in that department specifically, or even just as, coming out of Wake Forest in general, that prepared you well, to make that transition to ask those questions, the questions that you needed?
Right. So when I was looking at undergraduate schools, I was looking for an environment where we had that small student to professor ratio. As you mentioned in the introduction, I do come from a small town. So a lot of my classes were, there's a teacher and there's maybe 20, 30 students, depending on what class it was. So again, I would say that by going to Wake, you're actually treated as a student. I see Dr. Reeves is on the call. Like, I love Dr. Reeves. Um, Again, it was not being shy to approach people and voice whatever your concerns are, your thoughts. So again, I think that that was one of the things that Wake taught you. It really empowered you to be vocal.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Your
Thank
check's in the mail, Rosa.
you. So, Dr. French, so you've been with the Magnolia Scholars Program for a while now, and I know it's changed a bit over time. So maybe you can start first with telling us how, what does it look like today? How has it changed since it started?
Well, I can do a quick summary of that. We start kind of in a mode where we don't actually know what's going to happen. Wake in 2007, wasn't sure how many first generation students were on campus. It was a best guess. So when I actually get hired to start in 2009, it's really an unknown group at Wake Forest. We found that there were 153 first generation students, and the first focus was issues of graduation and engagement. What we found very quickly is there's not any academic problems with the first generation students. Sometimes there is a match of what their high school might have prepared for, but the student talent is there. And it was a matter of bringing the students together to build a cohort and to let them know you're supposed to be at Wake Forest and to make sure that they can take advantage of what's there. The issue with first generation students is that their parents haven't been to college, so they don't know the application process, the financial aid process. They don't know the games. They don't know what Greek life is, what study abroad is. And those same type of issues kind of follow going forward. Thankfully, we've been able to grow the program that we focus on issues of graduation first, and our numbers, class of 20 were 100%, class of 19 were 94%, and class of 18 were 100% as well. So we're good with graduation. The notion of a broad placement and making sure that students can get the job that they want is really where we're focused on now. International studies is there. We want to make sure that students get to like where Rosa is. They get to that space. And we do that on our side by making sure they engage with their faculty. As she mentioned, being able to speak to people, being able to voice your opinion, to ask for what you need is the first step in learning to navigate graduate school and learning to navigate professional experiences, looking at peers and mentors. Wake does some things that sometimes you don't like as a student. And I'll give one example and stop talking. They put you on what I call the breadcrumb trail. When you want to find resources, you can't talk to any one person and get it done. You have to talk to 4 or 5 people to make something happen. It takes a long time. It can be frustrating, but doing that empowers you to know how to help navigate in professional environments.
What do you see first generation students in particular, their experiences being as they're kind of making that transition from college to work to life, whether they're going on to grad school or anything else? Like, are there things that are particularly challenging for them, or things that are, you know, they're doing particularly well in that moment?
Things that are particularly challenging. We've just introduced Business 111 as a financial literacy class to talk to individuals about managing money. That's one thing that students didn't really know how to do, because you get inundated with all these tax forms, all of these human resources forms, all of these boxes to check and things that you might not know what they are. We've seen some transition and tried to fix that. We have seen some difficulties in applying to graduate school. If your parents couldn't help you apply to undergrad, then the graduate school process is 100% different. Now, how do you navigate that process? And so we try to put students in place to do that. We've had good placement numbers, but we do find the need to make sure that students really can ride on their faculty and be open enough to talk to their faculty about what they need to do and to help them figure out the programs that are best for them. Rosa was really clear on NC State that she wasn't leaving North Carolina. Michigan and Berkeley were not moving her. There was an orientation that she had, but that's valuable to know where you want to go and that the faculty can help you get there.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you particularly wish that your students knew before they graduated?
I wish that we, and Rosa has spoken this before, that we start developing a kind of a first generation network that I think a lot of students need to see the success was out there. I'll liken that to, as an African-American student, when people wanted to go to medical school, the first thought was, well, nobody's ever done it before. But of course they had, they just didn't know them. And I think as we let people see who's out there and what you can be, and that you being this is not new, it is not frightening, and you need not be afraid, that will be very helpful. We send students into entrepreneurship, into law school, into medical school. And sometimes just knowing that you can do it and knowing that somebody has done it like you is it's empowering. You know, you can't pinch off their glory. That's not what you're trying to do. Just to say, hey, this person did it, I can do it too. And I think it can be inspirational that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, seeing it as not only as one facet of who you are, but also a strength of who you are. You know, I think that's really powerful. Absolutely. So Rosa, let me come back to you. So what advice would you give to either first generation grads or current students about life after college, about work after college, about grad school, anything in that bucket?
That's a little challenging to summarize in a few minutes, but here's my go at it. So Dr. French mentioned, you know, sometimes it can be a little challenging with like you leave breadcrumbs and like whoever has to like pick them up and like figure it out. I will say that as a graduate student, I feel like a lot of the times when I needed to learn more about my project, it would be, you know, what else has been written in the literature? What are some of the limitations? Can I address these limitations and get to our goal? I will say that when you make that transition from grad school to industry, you just can't go to Google and be like, what is this? What is that? A lot of times you have to follow the breadcrumbs, you know, what colleagues can help you understand what you need to learn for your work. And so again, it's not being afraid to reach out to your colleagues. And then at the same time, like this is of high value because these collaborations can lead to new innovative projects and works that at the end of the day, make you stand out from the competition. The other point that I do want to make, and again, Dr. French brought it up, is networking. I know that this is highly emphasized, and I just cannot stress it enough. And just to give you examples, so currently my fiance and I are doing long distance, and he's looking at getting a position in Raleigh. And so when he was applying for jobs, there was work being done on the back end that he did not know about. We found this out later. But so when we were in grad school, we had our graduate peers. And again, we're the people who are easygoing, professional. And so we, again, have a good reputation. And so what he later learned, like when he got the job offer, is that word had already been put in his favor. So again, connections. And then in terms for me in my situation, at the time I was like, Charlotte's a good place to eventually place out the program, which is coming to an end in a few months. And then this two-body issue, it's difficult. And so now I'm having to pivot from Charlotte to Raleigh. I've made all these relationships in Charlotte. I've established my credibility, and now I have to pivot to Raleigh. And so what I'm doing is, I just contacted today, I contacted HR, and they were beyond extremely helpful in this process. I feel like a lot of times they're like, oh, HR, like just DQ'd me for this position. But at the end of the day, they're doing their job. They want to find the best candidate for the role. And so again, I'm putting myself out there on their radar. And at the same time, I did say, I did apply for this position. I did not get it. But what came out of it was, we were very impressed with Rosa's work ethic, her passion for research and science. And should there be another position that I want to apply for, like there's that word of mouth. So again, networking, even your peers who are now students, they will go on to positions, and we all move around and word gets around. So again, keep it professional, make sure that you're always putting your best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, can I add into that?
Please.
The world is much smaller than we think of. Like as a person that's in communications, I can tell you right now, if there's any of the major schools you want to go to in communications, I'm only 1 degree of separation away from somebody there. And they're going to call me, and they're going to call other people. And just like Rosa talked about, those networks are out there, and they're working either for you or they are working their ass off against you. So you definitely want to make sure they're in your stead.
Yeah. And some of those, those are those unwritten rules of not only the job search, but just professional success, that how you figure that out, the value of those networks and how to tap into them. That's so important. Let me just pause here and say, for the people that are with us today, if you want to put any questions in the chat, we would love to hear your questions as well. For Dr. French and Dr. Garcia, so please don't hesitate to do that. Rosa, one other a couple other follow-ups to that. So you're in this rotational program now, on rotation number 3, and have had some good experience there. Have you either formally or informally had mentors, coaches, people as part of that program that have helped you? And what has that experience been like?
Absolutely. So in this program, we have a steering committee mentor. And so we're paired with someone in the company who has a great deal of experience in you name it. And then we're also paired with a peer mentor. So someone that is either a year above us, maybe 2, and they just help you get through different parts of whatever you're having issues with. So for example, for peer mentors, you can ask a more relatable questions. Steering committee mentors, it would be more of, I want to start this collaboration with another division. In these collaborations, where do you anticipate things go wrong, and how can I prevent that? So you just have to tailor your questions a little bit differently. But again, it has been a great experience.
Did the program help you figure out how to work with each of those people?
So the program has a pool. So they have a pool of steering committee mentors, and you're just assigned one.
Okay.
As for students, again, they're like, oh, I want to help Rosa get through the next 2 years. And a lot of times, I've been a peer mentor as well. It'll be like, can I relate based on like the schools we went to, like the work that we've done, like some sort of like common tie.
Mhm.
The one thing that I will say that you mentioned, I've like started 3 jobs in 2 years. There's this one book, and I just want to put it out there for anyone that's willing to flip through the book. There's a book called The First 90 Days, and that is by Michael D. Watkins. And it is a great book from, what do I do when I first join a company? It's about like effective onboarding. And it just walks you through the different stages that you'll go on through your jobs. And as I speak to other individuals, including, directors, VPs, they're like, yeah, like when I get a new position, I'll just flip through the book again. It's a nice reminder. But again, I would recommend that book.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your, so you made this decision to go from a PhD program in science to industry. Was that something you were aiming for when you went into your doctoral program? How did you sort of figure that decision point out?
Yeah, I'll tell you, you just have to deal with ambiguity as you go. I can't say, 10, 5x years down the road, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Things come up and you either take it or you leave it. For me, I wanted to make that transition from academia to industry because I wanted to see impact. So research was more like, yeah, this would be interesting. And like, I could see an application of it in the real world, if you will. I don't know, maybe 10 years. It depends on what you're working on. Whereas in industry, in my first rotation, I developed a coating that was featured in like the next year's annual color trend show. It was one of 20 colors that are developed in the Americas. And so I would say that going through this program, sure, I have to move a lot. Sure, I have to onboard, and I'm constantly on my toes. But I think that it's very rewarding, especially because I can quickly identify, this is something that I see myself doing, or, this was a great experience. Here's a silver lining from it, and let's move on.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So let me get to a couple questions here in the chat. So from your friend, Professor Reeves, to either one of you, talk a little bit about the network on campus, before you graduated. So that academic network, but also the social network. And he's asking, is that different for first generation students, that experience? And is there something more that faculty should be aware of that could be helpful?
So I'll quickly touch on this. I think that being first generation Hispanic at Wake Forest was a little challenging, and something that I did not consciously realize I was doing is you have a sense that you don't fit. And so one way that I made myself fit was by joining the Organization of Latin American Students. And so I felt like that was my home base. But what you'll learn is that you just have to juggle your life. Sometimes it's with people that you can relate to the most, and sometimes it's with, your colleagues, your classmates, your whatever. So it's whatever makes you happy. The one thing that I will say I've also learned is when you are first gen or of a minority class, is that your peers are also not in a very advantageous position to be in these networks that have power or pull. And so that's, again, like, sure, you can join these groups, but you also have to balance it with connections that can also help you later down the road. There's another book, I think it's Connect the Dots, that comments a little bit more on it, and that's by Inga INGA Carboni. So again, having to balance your two networks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
think Rose is right on that. You have to look and say, here's a home place, but how do I get out of this space? And it was easy for me to join gospel choir, BSA, but you get to know Wake Forest as I got into the debate team and the yearbook and other things like that, and you make some different connections. It can be sometimes tough, and we talk about this with the first generation students. If your roommate drives a Tesla and they say, hey, if you need the car, just take it. Um, that might not be in your best interest to do. And you also want to find out that if your roommate says, oh, you know, my mom's the vice president of Coca-Cola, she actually is. They're not just making it up. And how do you find comfort in that space? Just realizing it's there. And so it is about actually navigating and learning to network at Wake Forest, starting first in safe spaces and then moving out. And that includes moving into administration and engaging with your faculty.
that's great. And then Megan was asking about what, you know, are there things that managers, that employers can do to better support their first generation employees? So thinking about things like, as Nate mentioned, you know, those tax forms, those HR things that, you know, are sort of, I think, first gen or not, are overwhelming to everyone, you know, when they first get into the workplace. Thoughts on what, you know, what can work environments do to sort of be helpful?
Go ahead, Rosa.
I relied on Google a lot. So again, for me, when I was in high school, my counselors were helpful. You know, Rosa, you are number 3 out of 150 students. Like, your next step is college, and like, I have no doubt that you can get into a college. But there was like FAFSA and like all these nice applications and fees, and like, where is this waiver? And so yeah, it was a lot of late nights up on good old AOL. You dial in. And again, it was just a lot of Google for me. That's the one thing that was in my favor. I like to research, how do things work, and then you can ask Dr. French, you know, I see this coming down the road in 2-3 years. Like, what can we do now to prepare for it? So I was vaguely aware of some things here and there. Other things, like, it just came out of nowhere. I'm like, what is this? But again, just being open to it, asking for help when you need it, and being open to suggestions.
Dr. French, let me give you sort of the last word here. You know, thinking both employers and universities, you know, what could we do to better support first gen students, first gen new professionals, to make sure that they're successful?
I think that one thing that has been most interesting has been some type of mentors and people to let you know what's out there. One of the most limiting things that students have when they're first gen is if they come in with an ambition to say, for example, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a physician. That's great as a goal, but once I attain that goal, then what's next? You need mentors to assist with that. You need mentors to help people navigate in every professional environment. Where does this go, right? And part of that's the students' aspirations, but it's also them knowing what they want to do, where they want to live, and how they want to live, and they need some guidance in that. I think for the university, we need to continue to stress that first generation students are a part of Wake Forest. That's important with the MAG Scholars, with the First in the Forest, with Duke Life, with Carolina Firsts, with Elon Watson Odyssey Scholars, with PAC Promise at NC State. As schools identify and say this is an important population, then the 50% of current high school graduates that are first generation students won't feel uncomfortable when they get to college because they're coming.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you for your time, for your wisdom, for your insight. You know, Dr. French, for all that you do for our students on campus. You know, Rosa, I know that you are very interested in and you know, working to figure out how do we build these networks for our students. And we just so appreciate that as well, and continuing those conversations and that work. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope that you will stay engaged with us, the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center, through our website, our e-newsletter, our social media. In 2 weeks, we have our next Wednesday webinar, which is featuring another Wake Forest alumna, Sam Larson, who is going to share some strategies from her professional experience using user research and design thinking to excel in your career. So we hope to see you all then. We will send out the recording of today's conversation a bit later. And for now, we're adjourned, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Very much. Rosa, by the way, send me your email address. I got to make sure you're getting our emails for the
All
Friends
right,
of
will
Chemistry.
do. Will do.